Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And thank you for joining this learning experience brought to you by LaunchDarkly and AWS. My name is Cody, and welcome back to Techstrong Learning. Before we dive into today's workshop, I do have just a couple of notes to review with everyone. First of all, we are recording our workshop today. So if you'd like to follow along later, if you'd like to rewatch, if you'd like to share this with the rest of your team, we're going to send you a copy of the recording via email shortly after we conclude this live session today. Now, if you'd like to get involved, there are a couple of ways to do so. Your first option is to use the chat tab, and you can find that chat tab on the right side of your screen. So whenever you do find that, I'd like you to let us know from where in the world you're joining from today. Now, if you have specific questions throughout our workshop, we want you to submit those through the Q&A box on the right side of that chat section. We'll be doing our best to answer your questions as we progress through our workshop today. So just send them in whenever you have them, and we'll do our best to address them when we can. If you jump to that handout section, you'll see there is a workshop guide dropped in there for you. So that is going to be the quickest and easiest way for you to get started and follow along. So I highly recommend clicking on that link now, having it pulled up and ready if you do plan on following along with us today. There will also be a couple more resources there uploaded here shortly. I'll let you know in the chat when those are up. And my final announcement, we will be selecting 2 of our most engaged attendees to win a $50 Amazon gift card. So ways to become eligible are to send in chats, send in questions, and to fill out our webinar survey that is pinned to the handouts, or rather in the handouts, and we'll post it in the chat toward the end of our workshop today as well. So to dive right in, today is our Talkin Ship virtual workshop, faster, risk-free deployments. I'm joined today by Cody D'Arkland, Head of Developer Relations at LaunchDarkly. So Cody, thank you so much for joining us on Techstrong Learning once again. It's a pleasure to have you back, and it's a pleasure to turn the program over to you.
It sounds good. We're going to try to make this as least confusing as possible with there being 2 Codys, but we operate as like a hive mind anyways. And so like we're all connected. It all just works. So excited to meet everyone. Excited to hang out. Funny enough, Cody, I actually have a different job now. I actually lead product innovation at LaunchDarkly, and so I still do these workshops. I still go in and teach people how to build, but I get to also have the joy of playing with a lot of the new stuff at LaunchDarkly. So really excited to get into this with everybody. This is a workshop we've ran quite a few times. It's a ton of fun. We run different variations of this running in AWS. Shout out to the AWS crew for helping us put this on. Really excited, really thankful for their help, and excited to be here. A couple of housekeeping items that I like to always tell people whenever I do these things. If I'm looking here, I'm looking at my screen. That's, we're going to be in a workshop building, and so you'll see me staring here probably 80% of the time. If I look over here, I'm looking at you, right? So that's where my camera is. And then over here, I have some resources. I have the chat up on the side. Those are there for me to follow along with. So I'll glance over here often just to check in and make sure there's no big questions. But the hive mind Cody is going to pop in and help me out if I get too far behind. So again, this is an interactive workshop. It's really boring if I just read. Charlie will make appearances. He likes to hang out too. It'll be really boring if I just read from this for the hour and a half or so that we're hanging out. So please ask questions. If you want to go off on side tangents, you want to explore something different, you want to challenge part of the workshop and talk through it. These are more fun when we interact and when we talk through what's happening here more. And so I'll do my best to guide us through that, but you should feel absolutely empowered to just drop a message in, raise a hand, and let's get into some conversation on it. It's a lot more fun when we're all walking away learning some cool stuff. So I believe that this was already posted up, but I am going to throw another link just to be safe and sure in the public chat. This is the link for the workshop that we're going to be hitting today. So if you launch that, I am going to start sharing my screen right now, and we will get into it. We are sharing my entire screen. And unless I get a bunch of messages in chat, I'm going to assume that the page loaded up for you and you are good to go. So we'll go in and we'll click this start workshop button. And I'm going to guide you through this all the way through so you kind of understand everything that's going on. Right away, click this launch toggle outfitters button. This is going to spin up our lab environment, and it takes a few minutes to initialize. So if we wait and click this in a few, it's going to take us quite a while. So you'll come in here and you'll click continue. If you don't have a GitHub account, you'll have to sign up for a GitHub account really quick. Most people do have one, so use that to sign in. And what this is doing is just running a local, or not a local, this is running a web version of VS Code and our actual application. And so definitely sign up for that if you need to, but it should be pretty straightforward for you to sign up using your GitHub account very, very quickly. Meanwhile, that's going to go off and start installing our application. And what that's doing is just pulling in a bunch of stuff from React. This is a Next.js based application that we build in. It's called Toggle Outfitters. It's a store application that we use to show off a bunch of different feature flag configurations and software release stories. So how we track metrics, how we track errors, how we get in and do releases, how we do targeting. All of that is stuff that we are going to do inside of this workshop today. And so that's going to go out and it's going to start doing its install. Like I said, it takes a couple minutes here to get through and completely run. While that's running in your background, you can come back in, scroll down a little bit. This is going to talk through a couple of configuration items. We set the scene as, it's your first day at Toggle Outfitters, and it's an exciting time because we are going to ship a bunch of stuff. Shout out to Peter from Africa. Good to see you, man. Thank you for joining. I just saw that in chat. Hello to everyone else who I didn't say hi to already. I am in Sacramento, California. It's very sunny out here. It's been a cold couple days, so excited to get back to the warmth a little bit. So Toggle Outfitters rolling out a bunch of new features. We talked about that. We're going to talk about de-risking releases, migrations. We're going to do targeting. We're going to do experiments today. It's going to be a fun adventure. Come down here, click on this Open LaunchDarkly button. Click it and just leave it alone for a few. It'll take a second to load up and drop you into an environment, but what this will do is drop you into an isolated project inside of LaunchDarkly. So you'll have your very own project to work out of that is set up only for you. So it will do a lot of work out of here today, creating those features, doing those targets, setting up all the configurations. But you'll want this definitely up and running. Switch back into our lab environment. We can see we're still doing the install. Right now it's installing Playwright. We use that later on to do some of the experimentation tests, so it's very useful. And here we go. This is firing up and opening inside of the app. And so the app is loading up right now. And if you click this little button over here on the right, this open in browser button, it'll bring up a new tab that we can use. And it's just a little bit cleaner of an experience overall. A lot of times we'll run this workshop using Cloud9 and AWS, really great platform for doing development. This one is running in a different environment today, just for some more specific reasons. But Cloud9 is awesome inside AWS for this kind of stuff. So as it stands, you should have your workshop guide up. You should have your LaunchDarkly environment up and empty, no feature flags in place. And then you should have the Toggle Outfitters application with this launching soon window on it. If you have those three things, we should be good. We've also got our app up here. Inside of here, we can close this simple browser. We don't actually need that open anymore. We can also close the intro text. We're going to be working over here in the left a lot. All of these different file configs are in place. We are feeling pretty good about everything. Jump in and take a look. Oh, that's a problem. I'm gonna have to fix that in the background real quick here. So give me 1 second to fix that. This is really important. Just give me 1 second on the side to fix that quick problem. That is our workshop configuration that we need to share out. right. We are going to drop this into chat. Now, this is a little bit wonky. It's not supposed to be this way, but that was a little bit of an error in here. So this .in file needs to be edited with some text. I'm going to paste this in the chat. This is very important. So I'm actually going to share. It's going to look a little confusing for a moment. I'm going to share the chat screen while I paste this in. So we need to copy all of this text out of chat. So highlight, copy all of this, and we need to paste that into here. Unfortunately, that did not copy over the way that I had wanted it to. So I'm setting this up. There we go. So you should have this LD-SDK key, this next public key on top, and then these three properties below. And so if you paste that text that I just showed you on the screen in, you should be able to edit that text and clean it up the way it's supposed to be. So I will try to paste this one more time and see if it actually pastes the way that I wanted it to. What we'll do is I will edit this a little bit here so it's a little easier for everyone. There you go. Should be able to just copy and paste that in, and it should pick right up into your editor. Sorry about that. That was again, not a intended error, obviously. Cool. So pasting that in like I shared it should set you up, and you should have your file set up the way that I'm showing it right now. This is very important. You will need this in order to do the actual workshop. Cool. I'm going to assume that everyone is moving along pretty well. If you have any problems slowing down, feel free to drop it in chat, but we're going to get into the actual workshop content now. So we'll scroll down to this bottom and we'll begin the workshop. And so what we're talking a lot about in here is the things that we're going to actually do inside of the workshop guide overall, or inside of the workshop overall. We're going to be releasing out a bunch of new things. So in this first module, we're going to create our first feature flags. We're going to implement that feature flags of code. That's one of the things that's really important for us about this workshop is we wanted people in code actually building these features in. And so we are going to do that today. We'll use release targeting and segments to control the blast radius of our changes, right? We want to make sure that when we're rolling out changes into environments that we are limiting that down as much as possible. We're going to use kill switches to turn off problem code, right? So being able to quickly turn something off instead of having to do a redeployment or take an outage or have a ton of customer impact, we can turn it off quickly using feature flags. And then we're going to kick off an actual migration. So we're going to move from a local building system built into the app, and we're going to start consuming Stripe. So this is a real use case that people often do. So we're going to get into this and create our first feature. So there's a couple of different feature flag types that are really good for us to talk about here. And I cover this in the workshop guide. We can do Boolean feature flags, which is like a true or false. We can do string-based feature flags, which is just the text, right? So being able to replace with a specific block of text. Numbers, so being able to choose, amount of replicas, choose which log level to go with. Like these are different types of numeric flags. And then JSON objects. My favorite is the JSON object because I can put a bunch of different configuration items into that feature flag and push them all out as part of an app config. And I like that a lot personally. And so we're going to come in, we're going to create our first feature flag. So inside of the LaunchDarkly platform, we'll come in and click on create flag. You should be in this feature flags tab here. We'll go create flag, and we get this screen that we can start to populate out with information. So we'll come in, we'll grab this flag name, copy it and paste it. Paste our flag name, and you'll see this key update. We need to delete that key and replace it with this flag key here. So this is the most important thing. This doesn't matter at all. This is just a visual reference. This one matters a ton. So we want to make sure that is set right. We're going to do a Boolean flag. So true or false, either it's on or it's off. We're going to go store enabled. Oops, sorry. We're going to go store enabled, store disabled. But before we create this flag, we need to set up our SDK connection into LaunchDarkly. So we're going to have this sitting right here. And we're going to press Command K or Control K on your keyboard. And we're going to go into this copy SDK key for the environment. We're going to grab our server side key first. That'll copy it. We're going to go in here into our .env file, and we're going to replace this first line with that. So that's good. Then we're going to do the exact same thing for this client key. Again, Command K, copy SDK key for the environment, client side ID this time. Copied client side ID. And then we're going to replace this. So what that does is open up the connection back to LaunchDarkly. If we go in and we look at our logs, which you don't have to on your side, we'll actually see it initialize the stream connection. Life is good. We are kicking into gear. Excuse me. So that's set up now. And so now I can come in and create my first feature flag. You want to make sure that this SDK using client-side ID is checked. This lets the client-side system actually read feature flags. So in this case, React being a client framework, like Python or Ruby are server-side frameworks. With, again, React being a client side, we need this enabled to actually read the feature flags. So we'll create our flag here. This is now created and it exists inside of LaunchDarkly, but we'll see our application hasn't changed at all yet. If I come in and I turn this on and hit save, nothing changes yet. Right? So that is still in place. Everything is set up the way we would want it to be. We are configured. Why did that not change over yet? Let's double check our .env config. That's good. Everything is set up right. Because we need to actually implement the code to actually do this configuration. So we'll go back into our workshop guide. We've set up we set up the application itself or set up our feature flag itself. Now we need to actually implement the code for it, right? So I mentioned that earlier that we're actually doing all of this input ourselves. So we'll come in and look at source pages index. So we'll go to source pages index. And we can uncomment this line. And you'll see that matches with our workshop guide here. I'm going to do something to move this over. There we go. That matches our workshop guide here. And so we can just come over here and press Command / or just delete those 2 / items off the front. And now use flags is communicating back to LaunchDarkly and getting all the feature flags for the environment. That comes back in a variable or an object, and we're destructuring that to grab out just the feature flag that's been created. So this store enabled feature flag. Then we can replace this code down here with code from our guide. Use this copy symbol over here on the right. You see copied. Use that copy symbol on the right. Replace line 26 with that. And our store successfully releases. Now, what if there's a problem, right? Like it's loading. Maybe we didn't want people to see this inventory. Normally, we would have to run a pipeline to go and roll that back to the previous version. But now, because we have this wrapped in a feature flag, I can come in here, disable it, save the change, and it's off for everybody involved. Now, that's great for being able to turn things on or off, but ultimately we want to be able to control the blast radius. I want it on for the people that I want to see it and off for everybody else. And so the next thing we're going to start using is release targeting. So head back into our guide. We go through and we talk about the model here. Create a feature flag, build your code, evaluate the feature flag to make a decision in your application. We're going to throw a complication in there with using release targeting to target who we want and then release our application. So we're going to create a segment to do this. Segments are really cool because what they are reusable building blocks that can be used against any feature you've rolled out, right? So I can say my dev users are in this segment, and then I can use that against any feature. What makes them super powerful is they're dynamic. And so I can change those at any point. I can set conditions on them. I can say anybody whose first name starts with the letter C gets this feature enabled, or people on the West Coast get this. And that'll update on the fly, and it'll change the application for users on the fly. Don't have to do redeployment. Don't have to build custom code to try and figure out how to handle those types of targets. That's all inside of that segment configuration. And so we're going to create a segment, and we're going to create the segment for our dev users or our developer users. So we're going to come back into LaunchDarkly. We'll go to the segments tab. We're going to create a segment, and we're going to use a rule-based segment. List-based segments would be like uploading a CSV and importing it, and a synced segment would be integrating with like a CDP, like maybe a Twilio segment or an Amplitude to populate out segments internally. We're just going to build these inside of the platform ourselves, and we'll call this developers. We could add some tags for easy sorting if we wanted to. We're not going to now. We'll save our segment here, and we're going to create a rule. So we'll call this developer team. And so now I have access to do targeting properties. We'll talk about the context later on a little bit, but in this case, we're going to choose a user context. We're going to choose an attribute of their name. We're going to say is one of, and we're going to give it a name, right? We can pick whatever we want. You pick your first name, pick your neighbor's name, whatever you want to use. So I'll usually add a couple. I'll do like Toggle as one. I'll do me. I'll do Peter from my old team. These are now all people who are part of my development team. And so I can save this change. And now this segment is created and ready to be used. I can hop into feature flags here. And we're going to use that segment to control who's going to experience this feature release. So I'm going to edit the default flag state to say that it's disabled. What that means is that when it's on, no one can see it. So just for grins, I'm going to save this change. And what we'll watch is the application doesn't change at all because no one's in the target to get it as a yes. So I'm going to come in and do target a segment. I'm going to choose my developer segment and say store enabled for them. Once again, save the change. Nothing changes at all because the default user I've set up in here is anonymous. So they're not part of the targeting group. But if I come in and click this login button and type in toggle as an example and hit submit, we can see the application release instantly. And so I'm now targeting this release at that specific user. No one else would see this, right? If you came in and logged in as Jane or Carl, you wouldn't see the application load up because you're not in the targeting list. If I wanted to remove toggle out, I could go into that segment and remove it or change the properties so that it's gone. And so in just a few minutes, we've gone and released our first feature, and we already have a ton more control over it than we would have rolling this out in normal circumstances. So cool. We're happy with that. We now have a level of control to turn on and off a feature on the fly, change targeting, control who can experience it. Our control over releases has skyrocketed. We've got a ton more capabilities here now. So this was us going through and setting that up. Usernames are case sensitive. This is important. It's not necessarily usernames, but properties are case sensitive. And so if I had typed in capital T, that would have been a different target than lowercase t. And so usually people will handle this in their code in some way, or they'll handle case sensitivity by syncing this in from elsewhere. There's a lot of ways that this gets handled in real applications, but it's important to understand that when you're doing targeting, that it is case sensitive. So we did our targeting of our feature release. We changed it to disabled by default. We added our rule. We added the segment to the rule. We turned the feature on, and then we saved it and released the feature out into the environment. You can see how people use this to test in production, right? So we oftentimes don't test in production because we worry about the negative user impact. We worry about rolling a change out. It breaks. Users are impacted, and now we're generating a new resume instead of a new feature release. That's not great. In this case, though, I can control who's going to experience that. So I can test in environments that are normally scary because I can limit it down to only the people that I want to be impacted by that change. It's pretty cool stuff. So we'll go in, we'll take a look at outage recovery now, or using like kill switches, or being able to control what happens when something causes an error. So we're going to create another new feature flag. We're going to call this one updated billing ID. So we'll come in here, we'll create a new feature flag, updated billing ID. And then in the guide, it has us give it a flag key of billing. So we'll edit this, call it billing. We're going to stick with this custom release. Now there's a couple of different flags here. It's worth me talking through. Custom is, I just want to build everything from scratch myself. I want to define all the parameters. I want to decide the behavior, all of that. Releases are pre-configured to do a feature release. I'm rolling out a new login screen. I'm rolling out a new backend configuration. Like all of those are just standard releases. Kill switches kind of flip that around and say, hey, when something goes wrong, I want to be able to disable this. I want a failure state on this. And so I'm using this to kill out a feature. Experiments, we're going to build one of these later on. Experiments are how you measure different features or different variations of the same feature to see which one performs best. Does changing the header text on the store result in more people buying from that store? I don't know. We'll find out with experimentation. Migration is really cool because what it does is it sets up being able to move from an old API to a new API, but it tracks performance along the way. And so you can attach things like error rates, consistency, latency, and get a real-time view into the comparison between an old environment and a new environment and how each one of those are performing. And so these are all different types of feature flags that we can create inside of the environment. In this case, we're going to stick with custom. And we're going to stick with the Boolean string or Boolean thing too, or Boolean feature flag type, Boolean thing too. Words are hard today. And we'll go ahead and grab these variation names also just to keep things clean. So we have this enable Stripe and then self-hosted billing system here. So those are all set up. We've got it set on the client side ID still. Everything is looking good. We'll create our new feature flag. Taking a quick look at chat, making sure everything is looking good. Cool. Everything is looking good over here. Cool. So that is looking good. Our feature flag is created. Now we can go back into our guide and follow along here. So the next thing we're going to do is update our code, right? We need to add in this new code to support the new configuration item. So we need to edit this SRC components inventory and replace our existing reserve button. So I'm going to copy this, source components inventory. We'll go back in, source components inventory. And if we scroll down, it'll tell us actually in the guide which line it's on. 130 is what we want. So we'll go down here on this left side and look for 130. We're going to replace this reserve button with the new code. So what is this doing? If the billing feature flag is true, give us this add to cart button. If not, stick with the reserve button. If billing's true, we have an error state that'll come in when we need it. So that's configured. The feature flag is in place. Now I could add on that targeting rule again, but if you think about it, I've already gated this behind feature flag for the main store availability. I probably don't need to layer it on twice unless I was testing something different. So there's a decision point in there about when you want to use targeting rules versus target more. The point is you have flexibility and control over that. So in my case, I know that only a few people can get into the store system right now anyways. So I'm going to keep this no targeting on here. I'm going to let it enable Stripe when this is on. And this is what's really cool. If I grab the app and I move this kind of over to the side a little bit, we're going to get back into full screen in a second, but I wanted to show how fast this happens live. Come in, review and save change. Instantly, all those buttons update to the new one. So we have a really high performance system as far as being able to roll out features. You saw it happened in definitely under a second. We're talking like 200 milliseconds at the most. So that's on now. We like that. We're happy about that. What do we do next? So life is good. Again, I could come in and do the targeting. I'm going to skip that in here. In the guide, we have to do it. Or in guide, we set it up. I'm going to choose not to. Let's go ahead and try to add something to the store. Oh no, look, an error has occurred. I did not expect that to happen. That's a joke. I knew that was coming. So again, we could come in, turn that feature flag off instantly, roll it back, and that error would be gone. What we're targeting only our specific users, so we know that there's a level of protection there. I'm happy to see this, and I can leave this enabled in production so I can debug it as a developer team while regular users are not experiencing it. So we like that. So why is this broken? Well, actually, what we know is that there's two different parts to this feature flag. There's the front end feature flag that's controlling the UI, and then there's also an API backend as well. This feature flag was implemented for the front end, and we need to implement the separate backend feature flag now to control the actual API connectivity. So again, once again, we're going to come in, we're going to create our new feature flag. So we'll leave that in place. That's on. Create our new feature flag. We'll grab our API here, or our name here, I should say. And then we'll also grab our enable Stripe. So this is going to be a backend feature flag. This is going to go into our API, control which API endpoint it's going to hit. We'll do a Boolean again. We'll say Stripe enabled, self-hosted. I think that's what I have for the text. Oh, Stripe checkout enabled, Stripe checkout disabled. So slightly different names. Cool. So those are all set up now. It's a backend feature flag. I still have the client side one checked. It's not that big of a deal in this very specific case. We can save that feature now, or create the flag, I should say. And it's available to use. Once again, we're going to come in and grab our code. So we'll copy this. We're going to go into the source pages API checkout file and hit line 50. So source pages API checkout.ts, and we're going to go down to line 50. We'll paste this in, and now we have the code to reach out to Stripe to actually get our purchasing working. And so inside of this code, we can see we got some code here that evaluates a feature flag. So enable Stripe, grabs the LaunchDarkly client, looks for a variation for the enable Stripe key, gives it its context, and whatever comes back is the feature flag value. So the true or false statement. If it's true, we're going to go into our checkout. Otherwise, return that the API is unreachable. So again, you'll remember we have errors here. That's no good. But now if we come in and turn this on, we can see we're getting successful checkouts on the bottom. And so now we've got this feature, these two different feature flags that control the front end and the back end configuration. Now, what if that feature hadn't been targeted appropriately? What if I wanted to automatically recover that in the event of an error? There's a couple of different options we have. I could do this inside of something called a flag trigger, which we're going to show in a moment here. I could use Release Guardian, which is functionality from LaunchDarkly to track error events and automatically roll back. We're not covering that today in this workshop, but there's a lot of options that we have inside of the platform to handle things like automatically disabling problem features. So for now, though, we're going to set up that flag trigger. And what the flag trigger is going to do is call a URL when there's a problem, and that URL will disable the feature. So again, we set this up. We tested out. Everything was working, but we want to make that better in the event of a failure. So what we're going to do for now is we're going to go in and we're going to disable that feature. We're going to go back to the problem state where things weren't working the way we wanted them to, right? So we're getting this error like we would expect. We're going to go into that other feature flag that we built for this, the billing UI one. We're going to go into settings, and then we're going to add a trigger here. We're going to use a generic trigger, and this trigger is going to turn the flag config to off. We'll save that, and this gives us a URL. Keep the screen up. Don't navigate away. We'll head back into our guide. and we need to grab the code for our error handling. So source, hooks, use error handling, and we're going to replace the entire block of code with this code. So we'll go into hooks, use error handling. We're going to highlight everything and just replace it. Then we have to replace this trigger URL with that URL from LaunchDarkly. So we'll copy this and we'll paste it here. This is now available to use inside of the application. And if we go in and use our app now, we can see it automatically disables that feature back to what it was before. Now, this is, again, a pretty big approach, and there's better ways to handle this. But what I wanted to show here was the ability to use flag triggers to control different states of flags based on properties. I would definitely recommend using something like Release Guardian for this, because we can create error metrics and latency metrics and have a lot more intelligence around when we roll back a change or just notify on it. And so that's a really cool capability that we don't cover in this workshop. So again, we're happy with that. We've got everything working. We got our feature flags to make this functional. Life is good. What we're going to do is we're going to link these two feature flags together now. We're going to say, cool, development is complete on both of these. And so these should only work when both feature flags are enabled. I don't want to be able to have this broken state where only one of them is enabled, and because both aren't, it fails to connect. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to create this between these two. And what we're going to say is, enable or billing can only be enabled when enable Stripe is enabled also. And so we'll come in here, we'll say into billing UI, and we're going to create a flag prerequisite. 1 second here. There we go. 1 sec. We're going to pop over. We'll turn this on first. We're going to turn the other one on first so that we're set up there too. There we go. Just checking to make sure everything's working on the back end real quick. I got a weird error that popped up off to the side. Okay, cool. Everything's working. So we'll go back in. Both of those are on now. Life is good. We're going to go into building UI, and we're going to go set up a prerequisite. We're going to say that if migrate to Stripe is enabled, this one can be enabled also, and we'll save that change. And so now we go in and add to cart, everything works. But if we go in and we disable the other enable Stripe feature, now both of them will be disabled and we'll be back to normal. So there's no more failure state in there. These are now linked and configured to each other. And you can use these to create dependencies between flags so that, you can only access new components when the new UI is enabled also. New API routes are only available when new UI components that support them are in place also. So you get a lot more flexibility in being able to control what's available and when. So cool. We've gone through, we've set all of that up. Life is looking good. And we are going to set up our new database migration feature flag to roll out that new database connectivity. Grab a water real quick. So we're going to go create a new feature flag called admin view. Create our flag, admin view. And we'll grab our admin mode feature flag. We're going to do this one again as a custom release. There's a lot of times where we would use the migration flag. This is a great use case for it, or the release flag. But for now, we're going to stick with this, and we'll do the string-based flag instead. Our migration is going to be to a Postgres database. Otherwise, we're going to stay with our static database that is built into the application by default. We'll go ahead and create this flag and save it. Oops, actually, I totally should not have done that. I did that wrong. And so we actually need to clean this out now. I skipped ahead a flag. admin view is supposed to be a Boolean flag. That's what happens when you don't read the instructions. So I'll archive that out. We'll jump in and take a look at our archived features. And we can delete that one entirely. So we can go and fix this. Cool. All right. Switching back to our live flags view, we're going to come in and we'll do admin mode. Grab our key like we would want, paste that in there. We'll leave it as a Boolean flag, true or false, enabled or disabled. Create the flag. And then we'll grab our code block for this, that it's going to go in source components menu between line 67 and 70. Source components menu. Source components menu. 67 to 70, we'll paste this here. And what this says is the admin mode's true. We get a new navigation field. Otherwise, do nothing. Take a look at our app. Nothing's available. But if we come in and turn this on and save our change, we can see we now have this admin view, and we can very quickly see our database connection. So that is looking good. We're happy with that. Now we're ready to go in and actually set up that new migration flag, or not migration flag, sorry. We're ready to go and start doing our migration. But first, we would normally set up a targeting around that. I kind of skipped over it in this case. We'd set up a target for the admin view because we wouldn't want everyone to see that. We skipped over that because we did targeting earlier. Let's go create our new database migration feature flag, and we're going to name it DB testing. So we'll come in, create our flag. We can also do Command K and do create new flag here, right? So that's an option too. That's weird. Not sure why that happened. Come in, create our flag. We call this DB testing. Again, always recommend copying from the flag key here, pasting it in. And we're going to do this one as this one is a string-based flag, unlike my previous mistake. Postgres and static are here. So we'll do Postgres and then static. And we'll create our flag. So that is now available. And we need to set up our actual code now. So we're going to go into source pages, our API route, and inventory. Source pages, API, inventory. And on line 47 is what we'll update. So line 47 will replace. Actually, it's line 51. I need to update those instructions with this. So this is grabbing that DB testing flag, getting the variation. And if it's Postgres, we're doing our database call. Otherwise, we're just returning the products from the local static database. Once again, no changes in our app yet. But when I come in and turn this functionality on, we can watch the app change quickly to the new version. We're getting more details. We're getting descriptions. And so this is actually a real database migration taking place. We're going from a local database that's built with the app, and we're connecting to a database, ironically enough, hosted out of AWS. And so in this case, we're rolling out this new database connectivity live. And this is where the magic of LaunchDarkly really kicks in, because trying to do this for specific users is actually really hard. Being able to say, hey, only my US West users are going to get the new database config, or only my people on Pacific time zone, which is also US West, only people at the San Francisco office are going to get this. Getting that granular on a migration is really, really hard, but it's kind of an out of the box thing with LaunchDarkly. So that's great. Love that. We've been able to roll out our new database. Again, we probably should have rolled out with approvals in this case. So if I come in, disable it, I could once again come and turn this on, choose request approval. It's a database migration. It's scary. I could choose what team, right? So I could say Ahmed on my team is the approver in this case, save it. and it wouldn't go into effect until he approved it, right? So you get good governance in here, good controls over who's going to be impacted by, or not who's going to be impacted, but how changes are released. This is how we tie in things like change control into the process. We're happy with that. Database is rolled out. It's available to all of our users. We're happy with the migration. Took place flawlessly. Excuse me. And that closes up module 1. So module 1 was all about de-risking releases and showing how we can control a release, how we can turn on or off, how we can add targeting rules to it, how we can build segments around it, how we can control different types of feature flags, how we can build prerequisites and use approvals to add governance in. And so module 1 is a big one because it builds a foundation of how we do everything else inside of the platform. I want to take a brief pause here and see if there's any questions from the audience. I'm not seeing anything in chat. But is everyone moving along good? Are there any problems? How are we looking? Give it just a couple moments and see if there's a response. I'm just checking through right now to see if there's anything. So far, no questions on the back end. I think we're good, and we're just going to keep cruising forward. Give it one more minute just to see if anyone has any. Cool. We will keep cruising along forward. So we are moving into the targeting section now. Where we're going to target experiences, and we're going to add a greater level of release targeting and personalization to our application. So we're going to roll out this new product experience access. So this is how we're going to roll out new capabilities to users. In our case, we want to roll out the new goggles store. So toggles is the thing. Toggles is going to be branching out into selling goggles as well. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new flag. We're going to call this one new product experience access. And if we take a look at our guide, the name, ironically enough, matches that. This is going to be a string flag with 2 variations, toggle and goggle, and just toggle. So we'll come in here. We'll do a string flag, toggle and goggle, toggle and goggle. And the other one was just toggle. Toggle, toggle. Create that flag. And we're going to create a segment to control this release now too. So we're going to come in and do our segment. And we're going to call this one beta users. So come in here, segments, create a segment for our beta users. And then we're going to do, if user in beta is true, they fall into this group. So user in beta, true, that segment exists now. Now we're going to update our feature flag with this targeting to support it, right? So we're going to come in and we will go into LaunchDarkly into our new product experience access, and we're going to add a rule for a segment for our beta users, and we're going to have them get toggles and goggles, but everybody else is just going to get the toggles option. We'll save this in place. We're not going to make any changes yet. We got to change our default rule so everybody else gets only toggles. And then we need to update our code. So we're going to go into source pages API products, drop this in on line 82. So use that copy button on the right, line 82. Source pages API products on line 82. Paste that in. And that's in place now. So here's our app. Everything's good. Let's go double check our steps. We have a beta opt-in. So if I go up to the top now and hit this, there's a early access program down there on the bottom that we could use. I'm going to enable this feature. We should see no changes in the app. But again, if I enroll in there, I could. Let's see what this tells us to do next. We're going to enroll in the new beta program. There we go, updated with the new goggles that are available. If I wanted to opt out, say I decided I don't really like seeing those goggles, I could opt out and switch back. And so this is a little bit of a different targeting rule, right? Because this is a consistent product capability that would exist forever. This isn't just a feature we're rolling out, it's changing the experience of users that are consuming it. And so like a beta program is a great example of that. A hotel chain with a loyalty program is another great example, or an airline with a loyalty chain, another great example. Each one of these are different custom experiences that you would want to roll out that would change often based on the user coming in. And so in this case, I've opted into a beta program and I'm going to get a different experience now because of that. That's awesome. So we love that. Now we're going to add in some additional capabilities to roll these out only to specific regions, right? Because ultimately, maybe there's a product embargo or there's export-import rules, and we can't bring goggles into specific areas yet. We need to get licenses and all of that stuff before we can go there. So we're going to add in this debug menu that's going to let us shift around some of our location data. So we're going to come in and create a new feature flag called custom debug. So back into LaunchDarkly, create a flag, custom debug. We're going to grab the flag key. We'll keep this as a Boolean. Debug enabled and disabled. And we will create our flag. Now we need to update our code. So we're going to go into source components menu and update lines 63 through 65. Source components menu, 63 through 65. We'll paste that in. And once again, now if debug is on, we get this new menu. If debug is on, we get the new menu. Otherwise, we get nothing. That's looking good. Now, just to get back in the habit of things, let's disable this for everybody. And let's add a segment in so only our developer team is enabled for this, right? Just using good release targeting. And actually, before we turn that on, we're going to go out and we're going to back out. We're happy with our store. Our store is released. Life is good. Store is enabled. We actually don't need this targeting rule anymore here. We're going to delete that rule and change the default rule to be available for everybody, right? So we've rolled this out now to everybody. The store is working great. So now if I logged out, I would still see those, but I don't see the goggles. If I came in and said, Brian, and signed in, I could opt in as Brian now and get the goggles back, right? Even though he wasn't in the original targeting rule. So let's leave Brian logged in for a second and let's show that admin menu. So going back to the other feature, the one we just left disabled. We'll turn this on. And we see no change up here. But if I was to log out and log back in as me, Cody, a developer, I get these new menus up top that I can use. So that's great. These are available for me to use now to change different configuration items inside of my app. We like that. This just gives me app data. I can see what's enabled and what's disabled. Life is good. So now let's go in and we'll add some additional configurations for this. So we've already set up our segment. And so we've only rolled this out to developers. We're happy with that. Now we're going to start controlling based off of properties. So we're going to come in and we're going to add a new configuration, right? So we got approval to release our goggles in Portugal. So we're going to start by targeting Portugal. We had our developer segment before. We're going to add an additional rule now on that only targets people inside of Portugal. So we have this set up for our developers. Now we're going to also add on another rule on top of that existing rule for only them. So developers here, targeting, and we're going to add an additional rule to include individuals. Oops, not individuals. That's not what we wanted. Build a custom rule. That's what I was looking for there. Go back to our instructions. We're going to come in. We're going to choose location, country. So we'll come in here. Instead of this, we're going to go location, country is one of, and we'll choose Portugal. Oh, I should have said PT, not Portugal. So that would have been a good mess up. So PT will change to, delete that. We'll go PT. Name this geo-targeting. Discard that. Life is good. It's one of, oops. We can also delete that rule. That's fine. Wanted to edit this one. We got all messed up in here. Location, country, it's one of PT. There we go. Now this looks right like in the guide. So save changes. Life is good. PT is now targeted also. And so these goggles now will only be available if you're in the beta group and in Portugal, right? So if I came in and I was to just enable the beta, you would see goggles are available. They should only be available if it's this and Portugal. So where is that other menu at? Custom debug menu is available for developers. Oh, oops. Well, the developer team is only available for both of those. So I can't see that now because I did this rule incorrectly. Let me go back and double check the steps here. Yes, we need to create a new product, for the beta user segment, not for the existing developer team segment. So that was a mistake on my part. Moving too fast ahead. So now I get the menu back. That's good. I'm going to go back into segments over here. Our beta user segment. We're going to go targeting. We're also going to add in another one that is for custom. Location, country is PT. There we go. This will work now. Save changes. We should see those goggles go away even though we're in the beta. But if I come up here and I switch to Portugal, they will come back. So we're actually getting those back now. But if I switch to France, they're not. Right. So as we go to other locations, none of them are working, but Portugal has them enabled. And so again, being able to roll out based on geography instead is also a really powerful capability. So the rest of this talks through the override and using it how we set up. That is feeling good. We're happy with that. How are we doing all of this targeting? The LaunchDarkly context is what makes this possible. And so a context is an object that kind of defines out your user. So as I come in here, we can come in and see the different configurations associated inside of this environment. So if I came in and grabbed something like my toggle user, I can see the context for them. So toggle has in beta true. And if I go into this, I can see the full context that's available. And so these are all properties that can be used to do release targeting off of. It's an object that is very flexible, and so I can add properties, I can remove properties, I can change values on the fly. It's not intended to be a user system by any means. It's meant to be an identifier of a session inside of LaunchDarkly. But you can see then all of these configurations are evaluating off of these properties in here. And so I've got things like device, like I'm on a Mac, so I get that targeting. I've got my environment, so we're in the QA testing environment. We've got location, grabbing time zone dynamically. And so these all become properties that can be used to do release targeting. Contexts are super powerful, and they're kind of one of those foundational concepts inside of the platform that are used to do a lot of really powerful things. There's a lot of writing or a lot of written content here to take people through what contexts are and how they can be used. It's a great read. It'll teach you a lot. So I want to pause real quick. We're about to cruise into our final module, which is experimentation. And so I wanted to see if there's any questions, how people are doing. Are there any issues? So far, so good then. We'll cruise into product experimentation. Give it just a moment and see if anybody says anything. Give it just a moment. All right. Nothing. Cruising along. Product experimentation. So in this section, we're going to build out an experiment that combines, that looks at a couple different versions of our page and helps us measure how effective those different features are at driving an outcome. So first things first, we need to have something to compare with. So we're going to do some product labels on our store. So I'm going to come in and create this feature, and we're going to make this as a string for featured product labels. So we'll come into LaunchDarkly. Once again, look at all these feature flags we've created in just an hour and 1 minute. Featured product label. We'll do string flags, and we're going to add in a couple of different configurations here. So special, sale, new, and blank. So special, sale, new, and we'll leave the final one blank. So these are all variations of that same feature flag now. So we can create this, and those are all available to use inside of our app. Go into our next section, and we're going to set up a metric around this. So we're going to call this one an add to cart details metric. So again, go into metric, create our metric, add to cart details. We'll name the event add to cart click. All right, so add to cart click, higher than baseline. I believe that's all of the configs. So add to cart click captures the click, custom metric, conversion, higher than baseline. Great. And so what we're saying there is that whenever someone uses this custom conversion, which we're going to show in the code in a second, fire off an event for this and send it back to LaunchDarkly. So we're going to create this metric. That is now available. We can see the setup in here is looking good. We're going to create a secondary metric for a checkout click. I'll event name that. Track when users take an action. Checkout click. Track when users take an action. Create metric. So both of those are now available for us to use. And we're going to add these into the code. So inside of components inventory.txt, Source components, inventory, .tsx, not txt. I don't know why I said that. And we're going to add this function in for our metrics. So again, this is on line. If we back that out, change real quick, we add this to line 66. That's there. So now add to cart click is available. And we're going to do the same thing in cart summary. So source components, UI cart summary, source components, UI cart summary. And on click, we're going to replace that in here. So we'll come in and grab this once again, grab this code, drop it in. That's available now. So every time these fire, or every time these are used, these will fire and transmit back to LaunchDarkly as events that we can use for measurement. Finally, we need to update our actual product codes. We're going to come into this source components inventory and update product card on around line 119. Source components inventory. Then around line 120, we'll replace this product card here with the new configuration. And we have our headers in place. Grab some water real quick. Great. So those are now only showing on the is goggle features. We're happy with that. And we can start to build out our experiment. And so the store headers are available for us. Oops. Go back in here. We can see all of these configured. That is on by default. So we get our nice little header text for each one of those. But it's not going to change the text until we turn this on. So back into our guide. We're going to set up our actual experimentation now. So let's go in and create our experiment. So we go to the experimentation tab, create our experiment. And we're going to grab our paste in here. So copy and paste in here. Determine the actual accent label affects our customer's decision to purchase. We like that. And we think that if people see different text there, it's going to incentivize them to add something to the cart. We are going to choose a feature change item, and then we're going to fill out these values. So our primary metric is going to be add to count or add to cart. Our secondary metric is checkout click. We're going to choose which variation we want to use, and we're going to split it out amongst 25%. So feature change. We're going to choose our name attribute here. Our primary is going to be add to cart. As well as checkout click as our secondary. We will choose our featured product label. We can see all of those variations come through now. We get a nice 25% split between all of them. Oops, and then we need to give it a treatment name. Oh, that's because I left that one blank. So real quick, we're going to go fix that. Feature product label, variations. Should have named that one blank. Let's go create that again. Copy that, paste. Copy that. Paste. Stick with our user attribute for our randomization. Oh, that's already good. Add to cart, checkout click, next. Choose our product label, next. 25%. There we go. We're happy now. So that is looking good. We're all set there. And we can turn our feature flag on and then come start this experiment. So we'll turn this on. So now we're getting different text up top. We know that's good. I'm going to turn off that debug menu because we're done with the whole Portugal versus here thing. So that's good. And actually, we're also going to come in. We've gotten approval. We are ready to roll this out to everybody. Toggles and goggles to all. That is good. Those are available for everybody now. And so we're ready to start our experiment. So we'll come and do experiments. We'll start our experiment up. And that is now running. And you see that text change because every time it's going to be a 25% chance of getting a different configuration there. So our experiment's running now. We're going to measure that, but we need some more data to be able to see how that's going to play out. And we're going to use something called Playwright to do that. This is where the directions go a little bit different. So I'll ask you to follow along with what I'm going to do here. And I have this documented in the note on the guide. We're going to come into ports and we're going to make this a public URL. We're going to copy the URL to the application. We're going to come up into this experimentation automation, and we're going to replace this URL with that URL. And what this is going to say is we can call this address for our experimentation run. We're then going to come into our terminal and click this plus symbol to get a new terminal window. And we're going to type in npx playwright test. And what this is going to do is fire up Playwright and send 100 requests through our application to see what happens. So we'll hit that. And it's going to go out and test. You can see it's already starting. What it's doing is it's firing up a small browser in the background and going in and actually testing this out over and over again to see or to simulate traffic into the actual app itself. So it takes a few for it to spin up. There it goes. We can see it starting. So it's gotten a couple of runs now. It's getting a little bit further. Sometimes there's a little bit of a percentage chance in there of how this is going to work. So it's trying it out in different configurations to see what happens. Sometimes it's going to get the label. Other times it's not going to get the label. So we'll let that continue forward. Again, those are running. And so it takes a little while to show up, but we would be able to come in here and actually see traffic coming in and what percentage of users are hitting each thing. So in this case, I have one in here. I can come in and run some myself as well. So I can come in and say, oh, I like that. I'm going to come in and do a checkout option. Cool. That's going to fire up Stripe. Things are looking good. I could buy those toggles. I don't want to buy those toggles. So I'm going to go back into the app itself. Keep refreshing, keep trying out different configurations, keep purchasing. And all the while, LaunchDarkly is going to be measuring how this is performing inside the app itself. Again, it takes a little while for it to fully populate. We can see we're getting different variations here, right, of people hitting different parts. And we can see different level of interactions. And so just off of the randomness, we can see most people are clicking new as the one that's most likely to be successful. But also, people ultimately click checkout more often when they had sale. And so there's kind of two metrics there that we can look at and optimize around. And so experimentation is how we start to understand if the features that we're actually releasing are performing the way we want them to. Experimentation gives us a ton of data to be able to make good decisions around how we're rolling out these features so that we can make sure that next time we iterate, we're doing it with data to make sure the right things are getting released to our users. So again, that's continuing to run. We're up to 53. Sometimes they're going through, sometimes they're not. But we're getting good results in to show us that data just from a performance standpoint. So again, 22% of the time, people are converting on new. Now, behind the scenes, this is completely random with the Playwright script that I'm running. So there's not a lot of logic there. But look at that. Sale is starting to pull way ahead in overall conversion, despite the earlier signs. So again, the data shifts over time. These two are pretty much even, whether it's sale or new. We're getting pretty consistent. And so, but by that number, we can tell sale is probably the one that is going to drive the most relevant changes for our business. And we can go deeper into the stats if we wanted to here, to go again, more data if we need to. So again, Playwright's going. We'll get a nice explanation in here as to what's happening with that data and which one's performing to be best, as well as some definitions around what the different configurations mean. But it's nice to be able to have this system right alongside your features. It's telling you how they're performing as well and how we can bring metrics in to gauge this. And that is the end of our actual core workshop. The next part of this was all about mobile, but it's more of a written portion of it as opposed to like a hands-on experience. So we talk a lot about mobile applications and how they can be used. But this is the end of the actual hands-on experience portion of the workshop. Hey Cody, do you have anything that you wanted to share with the group as we cruise out?
Well, I guess we could open it up for any final questions that may come in. I know we did receive one here from Lynn, and Lynn asks, what strategies and techniques can organizations implement to streamline their deployment pipelines and reduce time to market for new features and updates?
Yeah, so we talked earlier on about like the idea of being able to test in production. I think that is like my default answer to this is, the faster you ship things, the faster you build and get it out into your production environment and get in front of users, naturally, the faster you're going to be shipping, the faster you can iterate on it. I think organizations spend a lot of time with things stuck behind test cases and stuck behind test environments, not able to get like really good data because they're afraid of what might go wrong. But I think with like platforms like LaunchDarkly, you can ship a lot faster in general because you have those guardrails over who's going to experience it. And so like I tend to tell people ship the code, right? Get that code out there behind a feature flag, protected so that people can't consume it unless they're in the group, and get people testing it, get people using it, get your feedback, run your experiments against those specific groups that are testing your features and see if it's actually performing better. What we really want to do is tighten that feedback loop inside of LaunchDarkly. We don't talk about that as often as we should, but like if you're doing LaunchDarkly at scale, right, the speed at which you move through each of these cycles of fixing them should go much faster, or not fixing them, but redeveloping and adding new capabilities. And your test cycles should get tighter and smaller. And ultimately, that's what we want, is to just keep collapsing down that feedback loop and that development loop into smaller and smaller circles as we go.
Awesome. So that is the only question we've received so far, but I know we uploaded a couple of handouts during our program today, so I do want to call those out. We added a request for a demo as well as a link to register for the Galaxy conference. Cody, can you tell me a little bit about the Galaxy conference?
Yeah, Galaxy Conference is going to be a fun one. We've been putting a lot of effort behind the scenes into this. It's our user conference, so it's all about getting like both the best of what we're doing, but also what the community is doing in the software release space together. There's an in-person component out in San Francisco. We're going to do a bunch of things around it, though. It's going to be a really, really cool conference this year. We got Kelsey Hightower speaking at it, who's just brilliant and one of my favorite speakers to listen to. And so we're really excited for it. Again, sessions not just on LaunchDarkly stuff, but like really software development in general and how you can get on their build. We're doing a whole bunch of AI stuff. Our CPO is getting pretty involved in helping build out the talk track around AI, which is pretty exciting also.
Awesome. Well, we do have that handout currently pinned to the top. So if you want to go ahead and click that download button, that won't download anything, but it will take you to the landing page for that conference. Cody, do you have any final remarks, any parting words of wisdom before we start to bring things home?
No, I would say just definitely like the faster you ship code, the more you're able to have this protection around it. Like the faster you're going to get feedback and the faster you're going to get out to build. And so I'm just a big proponent of getting the things you're building in front of real users in controlled scenarios so you can get good feedback. That's the best wisdom I can give.
All right, I love it. Cody, it's been a pleasure. It's always a pleasure working with you. Putting together the minds of the Codys is always a good time. So
Love it.
thank you so much for joining us today on Techstrong Learning.
Thanks everyone for coming.
Awesome. So before I officially release everyone, hang out with me for just a minute longer. I do want to remind everyone we've been recording our session. So if you do want to re-follow along or finish up on this workshop later, you will be able to. Cody, do you know how long these accounts will be provisioned for?
Usually leave them up for about a week or two. So they'll
Okay,
be up. People can use them for a little bit. Yeah.
perfect. So plenty of time to rewatch, follow along again, play around a little bit more. Definitely take advantage of these additional resources for you. So back to the recording, we'll be sending it to you via email, but you'll also find it on the DevOps website. That is devops.com/webinars. I'd like to thank LaunchDarkly and AWS for sponsoring our program. I'd like to thank our audience for all of your comments and your questions today. We will be selecting 2 of our most engaged attendees to win a $50 Amazon gift card. So at this point, your fastest and easiest way to become eligible is to fill out our post-webinar survey that is pinned both to the top of the chat as well as in the handouts section. So as final remark, thank you all so much for joining us. It's been such a pleasure having you, and we hope to see you at a future Techstrong learning experience. Have a great rest of your day, and you may now disconnect. Thanks again, Cody.
Thank you.